Ha precedenti penali?
Oh, questo ce n'ho parecchi, ne ho presenti. Non promettete che sono bravo, che sono a disposizione, perché non ci scrivete questo.
Salvatore Riina, also known as Toto for his diminutive stature, was a cruel mafioso who flaunted even the code of the mafia. He was one of the most ruthless mafia bosses who ever lived and believed in complete alienation to suit his needs. His tantrums didn't just affect the people who crossed him, but eliminated innocent civilians who were in the way as well. His brutal policy made him secure his position at the head of the Sicilian Mafia, but it drew him unwanted attention from the government, and this was his shortcoming. In this video, we will be taking a walk on the bloody path left behind by this monster of a man. This is the story of the Sicilian Mafia boss of bosses.
Ma io non ho niente da parlare con nessuno giornalista, desidero solo che quando i giornalisti scrivono quello che è Salvatore Riina, non che si scrive mosse, che si scrive cose di bambini. Salvatore Riina ha 4 bambini, adora i bambini e adora tutto e tutto. Salvatore Riina è un povero tragediato della vita. Questo deve scrivere, cioè i pentiti, a me mi tragediano i pentiti dalla mattina alla sera.
Riina's life started in extreme poverty. He was born on November 16, 1930 in Corleone, a rural and impoverished area in what was then the province of Palermo. His parents struggled to make ends meet, and his father's little earnings as a small-time farmer barely covered the cost of 3 square meals for the day. In September of 1943, when Riina was just a child, his father Giovanni discovered an unexploded American bomb. Hoping to sell the powder and metal, Giovanni attempted to open it. Things didn't go as planned. The bomb detonated, killing him and Riina's 7-year-old brother Francesco, while also injuring another brother, Gaetano. This further scarred Riina's hard life and marked the turning point of his life towards crime. At the age of 19, he was involved in a fight with Domenico Di Matteo, which ended with Riina fatally shooting him. This crime led to a 12-year prison sentence for Riina, but he was eventually released in 1956. And this murder signaled the beginning of the trail of bodies Riina was going to compile. La nascita della belva. Michele Navarro was the head of the mafia family in Corleone until August 6, 1958, when he was assassinated by a trio of gunmen wielding submachine guns. This hit was ordered by Luciano Leggio, a ruthless 33-year-old mafioso who then took over as the new boss. The trio of hitmen, of course, included Riina and 2 other men, Calogero Bagarella and Bernardo Provenzano. With the help of the trio, Leggio began consolidating power for the Corleonesi faction. In the early 1960s, Leggio, Provenzano, and Riina spent several years systematically hunting down and eliminating dozens of Navarro's remaining supporters. Their violent campaign forced them into hiding due to arrest warrants. In 1969, Riina and Leggio were arrested and tried for murders committed earlier in the decade. However, they were acquitted due to the intimidation of jurors and witnesses. Later that year, Riina went into hiding after being indicted on another murder charge, remaining a fugitive for the next 23 years. Leggio, on the other hand, was captured 5 years later and imprisoned for Navarro's 1958 murder. Although Leggio still held some influence from behind bars, Riina emerged as the de facto head of the Corleonesi. Riina also maintained close ties with the 'Ndrangheta, the mafia in Calabria. His best man at his 1974 wedding was Domenico Tripoddo, an 'Ndrangheta boss and prolific cigarette smuggler, highlighting his strong ties and connections with other mob bosses. The Corleonesi's main rivals were Stefano Bontare, Salvatore Inzerillo, and Tano Badalamenti, who led various powerful Palermo mafia families. Their rivalry was so heated and dark that it triggered the start of the Second Mafia War. This was of course ignited by Riina after discovering that Bontare and Inzerillo were plotting to kill him. In retaliation, Riina orchestrated their murders, along with those of many of their associates and family members. This brutal conflict resulted in up to 1,000 killings, as Riina and the Corleonesi, with the help of their allies, systematically eliminated their adversaries. By the end of the war, the Corleonesi had effectively seized control of the mafia. However, Riina was greedy and wanted complete and absolute control. Drunk on power, he turned on his allies next and eliminated them over the course of the next few years. Filippo Marchesi, Giuseppe Greco, and Rosario Riccobono felt the cold steel of betrayal as they met their ends as a reward for showing loyalty to Riina. In January 1981, sensing the danger of the escalating Second Mafia War, Tommaso Busquetta fled to Brazil to escape the violence, and he played a big role in the downfall of the cruel mafia boss who disrespected the mafia's code of not harming women or children. The blood path of the mafia boss. While Riina's predecessors kept a low profile, casting doubt among some law enforcement officials about the mafia's existence, Riina took a drastically different approach. He ordered the murders of judges, policemen, and prosecutors to instill fear in the authorities. Pio La Torre, the secretary of the Italian Communist Party in Sicily, who introduced a new law to curb the influence of the mafia, tasted the steel of the bullet on April 30, 1982, for attempting to keep the mafia factions in check. This immediately caught the attention of the Italian government. In response to escalating violence, Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa, a general of the Italian Carabinieri, was sent to Sicily in May 1982 with orders to dismantle the mafia. However, shortly after his arrival, on the evening of September 3, 1982, Dalla Chiesa, his wife Emanuela, and his police escort Domenico Russo were killed in a drive-by shooting in the city center. This tragic event prompted public outcry over the government's failure to effectively combat the mafia, leading to the swift passage of La Torre's stalled law just 10 days later. Riina didn't know when to stop, though, and went for Tommaso Busquetta's two sons from his first marriage, Benedetto and Antonio, on September 11, 1982. This loss prompted Busquetta to cooperate with Italian authorities. However, the violence still continued, claiming the lives of Busquetta's brother Vincenzo, brother-in-law Pietro, son-in-law Giuseppe Genova, and four of his nephews, Domenico and Benedetto Busquetta, and Orazio and Antonio D'Amico. Busquetta was arrested once again in Sao Paulo, Brazil on October 23, 1983, and extradited to Italy on July 15, 1984. This time, he requested to speak with anti-mafia judge Giovanni Falcone, marking the beginning of his life as an informant. Strage di Natale. Busquetta was the first prolific Sicilian mafioso to rat out the mafia. He reported to the government that the mafia was a solo organization led by a commission, implying that the top tier of mafiosi were involved in all the organization's crimes. Busquetta's cooperation was instrumental for judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, leading to significant successes in the fight against organized crime. The Maxi trial was held, and this resulted in 475 mafia members being indicted and 338 convicted. In an attempt to distract investigative resources away from Busquetta's crucial revelations, Riina orchestrated a terrorist-style attack. On December 23, 1984, the Train 904 bombing occurred in the Apennine Base Tunnel, killing 17 people and wounding 267. Initially attributed to political extremists, this atrocity became known as the Christmas Massacre. It was only years later, when police discovered explosives of the same type used in the Train 904 bombing while searching Giuseppe Caulo's hideout, that it became clear the mafia was indeed behind the attack. The termination of the judges. In the Maxi trial, Riina was sentenced to 2 life terms in absentia. Initially hopeful due to the lengthy appeal process that often acquitted convicted mafiosi, Riina suspended the campaign of murders against officials while awaiting higher court rulings. However, when the Supreme Court of Cassation upheld his convictions on January 30, 1992, Riina and the top mafia bosses reacted by ordering the assassinations of Salvatore Riina and Giovanni Falcone. On May 23rd of that same year, Falcone, his wife Francesca, and 3 police officers were killed in the Capaci bombing on Highway A29 near Palermo. 2 months later, on July 19, 1992, Borsellino was assassinated along with 5 police officers in a car bombing outside his mother's apartment in the Via D'Amelio bombing. Both attacks were orchestrated by Riina, but he was still thirsty for more. Businessman Ignazio Salvo, who had advised Riina not to touch Falcone, was murdered on September 17, 1992. These assassinations provoked public outrage, directed not only at the mafia, but also at politicians perceived to have failed in adequately protecting Falcone and Borsellino. In response, the Italian government launched a massive crackdown on the mafia. His downfall. Karma knocked on Riina's door when his advice to Balduccio DiMaggio backfired. He scolded the mafioso for leaving his wife and children for a mistress. DiMaggio knew Riina and what he was capable of. The advice was a threat in disguise, so he fled, but soon returned to form an alliance with the Carabinieri police. He identified a complex of villas via Bernini 54 in Palermo, where Riina was suspected to reside. On January 14th, the Carabinieri Special Operational Squad, led by Captain Sergio DiCaprio, began surveillance around the villa complex using a camouflaged white van. That evening, DiCaprio showed DiMaggio surveillance footage confirming Riina's presence, including his wife Ninetta Bagarella and their children leaving in a car driven by a chauffeur. The following morning, January 15, 1993 at 8:55 a.m., DiMaggio positively identified Salvatore Riina exiting the villa complex in a gray Citroën ZX. DiCaprio and his team immediately began tailing the car, eventually stopping it at a roundabout on Viale della Regione Siciliana, where they arrested Riina and his driver. Second wave of terrorism. Riina's arrest wasn't the end, as it earmarked the start of doom. A wave of terror attacks swept Italy, aimed at intimidating mafia members from cooperating with authorities and in response to changes in prison regulations. The attack started on May 14, 1993, and this one targeted the television host Maurizio Costanzo, who had expressed satisfaction over Riina's arrest. A bomb aimed at Costanzo injured 23 people in Rome. Costanzo survived, but more bombings were to come. Less than 2 weeks later, on May 27th, a bomb placed under the Florence Torre dei Pulci killed 5 people: Fabrizio Nencini, his wife Angela Maria, their daughters Nadia, who was 9, and Caterina, who was 2 months old, and a 20-year-old Dario Capoliccio. 33 others were injured in this devastating attack. There were also attacks on art galleries and churches that left 10 people dead and numerous others injured, sparking outrage across Italy. Investigators believe that many of these murders were orchestrated by Leoluca Bagarella, who wielded significant power within Cosa Nostra and was believed to have more influence than Riina's official successor, Bernardo Provenzano. Provenzano disapproved of the terror attacks, but Bagarella sarcastically suggested that Provenzano wear a sign stating, "I don't have anything to do with the massacres." Riina didn't stop his operations after his arrest. He ordered the assassination of a 13-year-old son of a mafioso who was an informant. He cruelly asked for him to be dissolved in acid and found nothing wrong with going after the children of those who crossed him, even though this was clearly in opposition to the mafia code of not touching children. Justice is served. Salvatore Riina was incarcerated in a maximum security prison in Parma with strict controls to prevent him from orchestrating criminal activities from inside. Authorities confiscated over $125 million US in assets belonging to Riina, including his expansive mansion, which was acquired by the anti-mafia mayor of Corleone in 1997. This mansion was later repurposed into a police office, inaugurated in 2015. Throughout his legal battles, Riina was sentenced to a total of 26 life terms, which were inclusive of his part in killing the 2 judges. He served his sentence under stringent conditions while fighting heart problems up until his demise. His lawyers fought for a house arrest sentence in 2017 because of his critical health condition, but this was denied. He passed away later that year, finalizing the end of the terror boss. For more dark stories from the underworld, subscribe to the channel and smash the notification bell to get front row seats.